digits 988 can save.
All right, welcome on in to the Falls Count Anywhere podcast, the very first podcast we are doing here for 2023. So happy New Year to all. Man, we're getting old, guys. It's already 2023. Where the hell did the calendar go, man? Jeez.
Yeah.
Anyways, yours truly, Charlie Turner, along with Chris DiCarlo and John Restino here. Gentlemen, I hope you guys had a great holiday and New Year.
Yes,
Thanks.
you too all. And happy new year, of course, to our many viewers and listeners across the country and world. We appreciate it. And we're going to start the new year off right, guys.
Absolutely. Yes. And real quick, before we get into wrestling, I just want to give a quick shout out to Damar Hamlin. He's a local player here for the Buffalo Bills. We are in Western New York. We are in Niagara Falls, hence the Falls Count Anywhere name. But regardless, even if we were somewhere in Alaska, I'd still want to give some love out to Damar Hamlin. His recovery, just had the breathing tube removed. He's recovering remarkably according to doctors. We wish him the best going forward because on a human level, man, that was tough to see, and we're glad he's doing better. So I just want to give a quick shout out to Damar Hamlin and a speedy recovery. So we're pulling for you, man.
Yes, indeed.
So anyway, guys, of course, we're here to talk wrestling, though, right? It's Saturday. We're talking some pro wrestling. Chris, got a great guest lined up today, man. We're going to be talking some old school wrestling like we always do. We're going to get some great stories today. Who do we got, man?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, well, indeed. It is my pleasure and honor. As we say, we have some guests that we say wrestling royalty, right, guys? Right. And today is for sure. Former 32-year veteran pro wrestling referee. He's done it all. The WWF, the NWA, the AWA. Let's welcome Mr. Dave Dwinell. Welcome to Falls Count Anywhere, sir.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys this morning. And again, I'm so happy to hear about the recovery of the football player from your area, and he's in our prayers and his family. Yeah, thank you for inviting me on the show. Now, some of the people out there are probably going, Dave, who? You know, because sometimes they don't recognize the name, but they may have seen me in some of my matches from the Garden or other matches. But thanks again for inviting me.
It's our pleasure, and we appreciate your time and help. And we're going to get right into it, right, Charlie? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, as I mentioned at the top of the show here, Chris provides us with classic wrestling clips when we do our other shows and everything. So we love to talk classic wrestling. 32-year career. You've probably seen a lot of things in the wrestling business, and we love hearing those stories. Anybody that kind of over your career that kind of stood out to you as somebody that was that you regarded as maybe the best in the business, or anybody or maybe a group of guys that you had that were just in that top tier wrestlers that you enjoyed refereeing matches for?
Well, I think any of the real classics from that era. The first one that comes to mind is Bruno Sammartino. He came out of retirement for a match. I don't know if he replaced his son who had left the WWF or if there was an injured wrestler, but he was very friendly with Arnold Skolins. Arnold ran the White Plains County Center, which is near where I lived. I used to get quite a few of those shows. And Bruno came out and wrestled Cowboy Bob Orton. And it was a great match. And Bruno had been my hero growing up. 20 years earlier, I was wrestling on the lawn with my brother, and here I am 20 years later in the ring with Bruno. And I got to raise his hand in a ring. And in those days, you didn't have the cell phones or the phones with the cameras. So I saw a fellow in the front row, and I said, if Bruno wins the match, would you take my picture? And he said, sure. So we got in a ring, and Bruno won the match via disqualification. And I raised his hand. I said, come with me. And we walked all around the ring because I had to get him to the camera. that was taking a picture of us, and he said, "Are we on television?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'll explain it to you in the locker room," but I figured I'm not going to blow the one opportunity I have to raise his hand in the middle of the ring.
Right.
So we got in the locker room, and he got a big kick out of it. And 25 years later, I had him sign it.
Oh, wow.
So that was one match because I had seen Bruno as a child. I went to New York World's Fair back in 1964, and I had seen him as a child. And I was maybe in 8th grade, and he was in a beer pavilion carrying a quarter keg on each shoulder in the Budweiser pavilion. So I waited till everybody left, and I went over and I said, "Bruno," I said, "I don't have a piece of paper. I want your autograph, but I don't have it. But I just want to say hello and what a great wrestler you are." He talked to me for 10 minutes.
Oh man, what a thrill, right? Yeah.
12-year-old kid. He talked to
Yeah.
me for 10 minutes. And I said to myself, this is a real, real gentleman, you know. And years later, I was having dinner with him after a show. He was doing the color commentary, and I was having dinner with him. And he said to me, I was a new ref at the time. He said, "Dave, can I give you a piece of advice?" And I said, "Of course." He said, "If there's 5 people at a show, or 50, or 50,000, or 500,000, you work the same way. You work hard because these people saved up to spend their money to see you. They might have saved for weeks, and you owe these 5 people the best that you can give." And I never forgot that. But that's a humble man.
Indeed, that is great.
Great
And
perspective. Yeah.
Bruno was one. Bruno was one. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
no, that was just, I mean, that's just awesome to me that you got to be close with him and to, be like a friend. That's awesome.
I mean, he sold out the Garden, 3 years in a row, every other month. I mean,
I was going to say he was like the king of MSG. Yeah.
Yeah. Another match that comes to mind, it was fantastic, was Nick Bockwinkel against Rick Martel for the AWA title. 2 outstanding workers. And what made the match really special was Bockwinkel was managed by Buddy Rogers. So I got to work with Buddy Rogers, Nick Bockwinkel, and Rick Martel in the same ring. And at the end of the match, I was arguing with Rogers. And, he's a legend, obviously, the first WWF champion. And he won a tournament in the Bahamas or something that no one ever attended, if you recall.
Just like the Intercontinental title from Pat Patterson, huh?
Yeah, yes. I could never find anybody that was at that match. I don't know why. But at any rate, that match comes to mind. Harley Race, another great guy to have worked with. These are the people that I admired for their wrestling skills and their ability to. I mean, true legends, true champions, and it was just a pleasure, and I can say an honor to be in a ring with them.
I'm sure. And one thing I'm curious about too, Dave, is refereeing matches, singles matches versus tag team wrestling. Tag team wrestling sometimes can get chaotic, where there's all 4 guys in the ring. The referee has to restore order. Did you have any preference as far as like refereeing a tag match over singles or vice versa?
Well, if it's a tag match with one of the big promotions, it usually goes fairly smooth. Sometimes you can run into problems with the independents, which I worked with quite a bit. But you also one of the first, I started traveling on the road back in the early 80s with a group called Northeast Championship Wrestling, and they were one of the biggest independents, and I was fortunate enough to be their referee. They'd use one ref in those days. I'd do 7-8 matches.
Oh,
Because
wow.
they wanted to save money, so they hired me because they felt at the time I was in my 30s, I could do all 7 matches. Well, we were at a show in Connecticut, and it was Toru Tanaka and let's see, it was Toru Tanaka and who was the other guy? Maybe Hillbilly Cousin Luke against Ted Arcidi and Abby the Butcher.
Oh, wow.
Now, all 4 guys extremely slow. And all 4 guys are in the ring together. Now, Tanaka was going to go over. He was probably the bigger name on the show. He was going to go over, but the match got out of control. The match got totally out of control. And what happened was Arcidi got in the ring and he used the wrong end of the chair and sliced Luke's ear. And the next thing I see is Abby's out of the ring and he's grabbing a ring bell and he comes in and he's hitting his ear to get the blood to come out more. And I'm going, what the hell are you doing? And he goes, good for the business, brother. Good for the business. I said, maybe good for the business, but it ain't doing Luke's ear much good. So it's totally out of control. So I disqualified everybody and I said a double disqualification, which was not the finish. And this is the first show I'm working for this promotion. So I said, oh, Tanaka's going to go wild. So I got back in the locker room and my shirt's covered in blood. And, I'm sweaty and I'm sitting on a bench in a corner and I see this big behemoth Tanaka coming towards me. And I'm going, oh God. So he comes over to me, looks down and he goes, do you have a car? I go, Jesus, she's going to take my car. I said, well, yeah, I do. Why? He goes, could I ride with you? I don't like riding in a van with smelly wrestlers. From that time on, we traveled together. But I wanted to tell you because sometimes things can happen in tag team matches that I'm called for. And
Jeez,
but
that's great.
Pretty funny.
Legend there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
Another legend. Also, Dave, our friend, John's wife, Robin Restino, also does the some networking and everything for us. We're going to have her join the show with Robin's question for you, Dave. And here we go.
Sure.
All right, I'll bring her in. You won't see her, but you'll hear her voice. Hold on.
No problem.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Robin.
I was reading about your book, and from what I understand, you worked with many, many wrestlers over your 32-year career. I was interested in the Junkyard Dog in particular. He was one of my favorites. And I was just wondering what it was like working with a guy like him who was more charisma than technical wrestling. Did that make it more difficult as the referee?
Not really, but I can tell you a couple stories about the dog if you'd like to hear them.
Oh, I'd love
He was
to.
a famous
Sure.
favorite wrestler. I worked for Office Promotion. Offa had a promotion out of Allentown, Pennsylvania, Offa and Sika. And this was, and if you've watched The Rock on TV, that I actually refereed in parking lots for Offa with Rocky Johnson. And I'm sure the young Rock was, actually Rocky was on my first show. And it was at Christmas time, and I'm pretty sure the young Rock would have been with him at that time, although no one would have known what was going to develop. But I used to drive the Junkyard Dog. He sometimes needed a ride back from Pennsylvania from the shows, and I'd ride with him, and he would tell me stories. Like he told me this one story about he was doing a show in down south, a fair show. It's outdoor show, and they got in the ring. It was at Battle Royal. And he sees this huge guy running around the track before the matches. And then the Battle Royal starts, and this guy comes out of the background. He figured he's a local wrestler, huge, humongous, powerful man, young. He gets in the ring, and they started the match, and he throws one guy out head first from the ring. And he goes, what are you doing? And then the second guy he throws out is the guy who was supposed to win the Battle Royal. So the dog goes over to him and says, well, what are you doing? He says, my mom and I can use that $2,000. He was a mark who had come into the ring and was throwing people out because he actually thought he was going to win the $2,000 if he stayed in the ring long enough. And finally, I said, "How'd you get him out?" And he goes, "Well, one of the wrestlers had like one eye," and he goes, the wrestler goes up to him and he looks at him with the one eye and he says, "I'm going to kill you." And the guy jumped out of the ring because he got really scared. That was
That's great.
Wow.
That was and then another time, and I'll tell the story because I think it's funny, but it may not be appropriate, but who cares?
We're all about that. Yeah.
Junkyard and I are driving. We're in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and that's a steel town where steel workers work. And he says, "I'm hungry, Dave. I want to stop." So I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Let's go over there." I said, "Well, I don't know. That doesn't look too great. There's a club light flickering on and off, and there's beer signs in the windows." And I said, I don't know. Bethlehem is a white steel town. So I said, I don't know. He said, "Let's go in." So we went in, and there's maybe 15 white guys at the bar. And as soon as we walked in, everybody stopped talking and looked at us because it was probably the first African American ever went into the place. So everybody stopped talking. And I said, oh my God, this could be a problem. Dog looks at him and goes, Dave, my God, we walked into a Klan meeting.
Oh, man.
Everybody started laughing. The entire place started laughing. And one guy goes, you look familiar. And I said, it's a junkyard dog. He goes, come on in. They bought us beers. They bought us beers. They wanted to talk wrestling. He had totally deflected the situation.
Yeah.
Great.
And I'll never forget that night. And he was just a nice guy. He was a nice guy to ride with. We always had a good time. And I really enjoyed I enjoyed working with him. As a matter of fact, I have a picture in the book of him and Alpha wrestling.
Oh, I'll tell you, I will definitely be on the list of people that's borrowing that book from Chris when he's done.
That's great. And
Yes.
like I say, he was really a good guy to work with. And
JYD
was the first show I worked at the Garden.
Yeah.
He was the first show I worked at the Garden. And he fought. Who was the guy? Not Black Bar, but somebody like him. He was a cowboy with a whip. I forget his name. It's the only mistake I made in the book. I put down it was Black Bar. He was in the last match at the Garden that they used a drop-down microphone, and I had that match. After that, they used a handheld mic. I'm sorry, I'm talking.
No,
that's
go ahead.
yeah.
Great.
I was going to mention another one that Robin likes, and of course we all kind of do and have a little respect for, is the King, Jerry Lawler. John.
Oh yeah,
Jerry. Michael Lombardi runs Northeast Wrestling, and he had Jerry on a lot of his shows because Jerry, and he was actually, I think, managing Jerry in a way of getting him set up with photo ops and all of this. And every time Jerry was on the show, I would always get his match. And one night he wrestled Mick Foley. Okay. And they decided that they're going to have a 20-minute match and do every finishing hold of every favorite wrestler. But they were not going to tell me which was the real finish. I had to figure it out in the ring.
Uh-oh.
And I said, you guys, you son of a guns, how dare you? And so I went in the ring not knowing what the finish was, working, and my hand was red because they did, I don't know, 15 finishes or more, and they did everything, and they were just having a pretty good time. But Jerry was a pleasure to work with. Phenomenal for he's my age. I'm 73. He's my age, I believe, and he's still working. As far as I know, he still appears in some of my shows, and just a great guy. Very funny, a very funny sense of humor. And he had a great line one night. We're in the ring, and these three guys sitting alone in the front row were going. So they were mocking him or something, and he looks down and he goes, "Look who's talking! Saturday night, three guys sitting together by themselves in the front row of the wrestling show. Because you have the nerve to mock me." So he had some great comebacks. He was one of the best guys on a microphone. I think him and Bobby Heenan were, I think, the two best guys. And of course, the one guy I never met was the Grand Wizard. I would have loved to.
Oh,
the Wizard of Wrestling,
Ernie Roth. Yes,
I got in just as he had gotten out, 82. But those are my Jerry Lawler stories. That's a couple. But Jerry was great to work with. Just a wonderful guy and a legend.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome. That's
John?
awesome.
John, question?
Yeah, Dave, I was wondering about the, and this is kind of a question, I guess maybe just kind of answered it, but they don't use managers much anymore. They like you were talking about the refs, barely any even commentators really are that like Mean Gene used to be. Who did you think was the best manager ever? If you could put them in an order or something.
Well, this is just my opinion. It wouldn't be the opinion of everybody, but there's a group. I very much liked the Grand Wizard, as I mentioned, because I thought his interviews were fantastic. McMahon.
Yes.
Certainly the three managers that I worked with during the classic period were Freddie Blassie, who I became very friendly and very close to. Freddie Blassie, as let's see, Freddie Blassie, and there was Bobby Heenan, and there was
Captain Lou.
Captain Lou. I thought Heenan was a terrific manager. He had some great classic lines, and actually, I worked about 13 shows at the Garden, and Bobby and Gorilla and Lord Alfred Hayes were the commentators, and I just thought they were. Bobby once called me. He thought I was favoring the face a little too much, which I wasn't. He goes, "Yeah, this referee's lost control of the match. He wouldn't even make a good mall cop." Stuff like that. And
sounds like a Bobby Heenan line. Yep.
Yeah. And he would, and Munson would say, "You think you could do better?" And he said, "Of course I could." And he said, "Well, that's why you don't have a bow tie on." But they played off each other so well. But he was a good manager. I did him when he was managing Rick Rude. And Rude had thrown me across the ring, and man, he was on his knees begging me not to disqualify him. Why did I disqualify him? That kind of stuff. And the guy that I enjoyed too was Freddie Blassie. I mean, there may have been better managers, but Freddie Blassie was never off stage. Okay, he was never off stage. Even off stage, he was on stage.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I worked with Freddie was in one of the worst sections of Brooklyn, tough area. Okay, Brooklyn, New York, Bedford-Stuyvesant. It was really tough at the time. It's probably cleaned up today, but so I'm in a ring, and he comes in with the Sheik, right? And he's in the ring in the Bedouin costume, and he comes over to me. He goes, "Jesus, Dave, we're in trouble. The people in the audience are tougher looking than the wrestlers." I said, you may be right. And then he came up with a line: "You can't laugh in the ring." We used to get paid. I mean, can you imagine a WWF? This was at a high school, a Catholic high school. Imagine a WWF coming to a Catholic high school with top wrestlers from. So we used to get paid according to the number of people in attendance in those days.
Oh, wow.
If there was 40,000, if there was 400, you'd get the minimum. If there was, so they'd ask for a count, and then we'd get paid accordingly. So he looks up and he sees this 450-pound guy sitting on two seats in the balcony. And in a straight face, he goes, "Dave, you got to talk to Skolin. You tell Skolin to go up there and check and make sure that guy bought two seats, because one more ticket could put us into a different pay category." So he wanted Skolin to check the guy's tickets. And I wanted to laugh, of course, but you can't laugh in the middle of the ring. So, and he would come out, and meanwhile, he'd have the cane over my head swearing it. And I'd say, "You use that cane, I'll disqualify you." And this is what we're talking about. People sitting in the balcony. And I said, "Freddie, the balcony could collapse." He goes, "What the hell are we here? The balcony, we get to go home early." And it was a night they lit the Sheik's car on fire in the parking lot.
Oh God.
Yeah. Classy Blassie, the Ayatollah Blassie, right?
The Ayatollah Blassie, he was one of a kind. He just had. I heard a story about him and Paul Heyman. I don't know if this is true, and I hear stories. I heard him and Paul Heyman were driving back from a show one night, and he wasn't seeing so well, and he was in a Cadillac, and he was on a Springbrook Parkway, and he got up on the median, where the grass is and stuff and trees, and he was riding on there, and he turned and looked at Paul and said, "God damn, they got to fix these goddamn roads. These roads are in terrible shape." He was on the median. I don't know if that's true or not, if that's just a wrestling story, but I thought that was pretty funny.
That's great. Guys, let's do this. We're about 20 or so minutes in here. We're going to take a quick break. But Dave, the one story we want to get into, you were telling us a little bit off the air. I definitely want to get it on the podcast here about the Iron Sheik, because we usually feature the Sheik here on our show with the Sheik tweets on social media. We get a good laugh out of it. I know you got some good Sheik stories. So
sure, absolutely.
Let's check in with our sponsors here. It'll be about a minute and a half here. And we'll be right back with more of Dave Dwinell here. We'll
Excellent.
Right back,
thank you.
Digits 988 can save a life. If you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide or experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis, 988 provides connection to free confidential support. There is hope. The Lifeline works. For 24/7 confidential support, just call, text, or chat 988.
All right, welcome back, Falls Count Anywhere podcast. Charlie, John, and Chris here, along with longtime veteran referee David Dwinell. Hearing some great stories so far, guys. And what we want to get into, Dave, is again, as I mentioned before the break, there we usually have a feature on our show every week where we just kind of get a good laugh out of the Iron Sheik's social media account on Twitter. But you were telling us a little bit about a story with him and Nikolai Volkov, where a dart ended up in somebody's foot. What exactly was going on there? Can you tell that to our audience here?
Well, I think the match that I worked, and I've probably worked thousands of matches, I worked with about 350 named wrestlers and 45 champions over the years. Not necessarily when they were champions, but we had a match at the County Center in White Plains, about 6,000 people. Blue-collar workers, smoking, drinking, betting on the matches, totally different than today. Very few kids in attendance. And there was so much heat going on at that time because Volkov and the Sheik had just lost the belts to Wyndham and Rotundo. So they were trying to regain them. They had just lost them, and there were 6,000 angry people. It was the last match of the evening. People had been having a lot of libations, you might say, and the doors were, it was a very cold night. The doors were in the county center were open. There were people standing in the street waving American flags. And you talk about heat. I don't know, and this is not a knock on today, but I don't know if you're going to see heat like this again, where, you had 6,000 people and then another 50 or 60 on the steps of the county center and in the street in 30-degree weather waving American flags. And of course, people believed it was kayfabe. It was in full swing in those days. So I had the match, and people had kind of known me at the county center because it was 20 minutes from my house. So I got a lot of matches here over the years. So when I got in the ring, they knew me as kind of a no-nonsense ref. Johnny Rods had instructed me. He was my first match. He said, "You be the sheriff. You take charge." Okay, so I get in the ring, and here's Wyndham and Volkov. Volkov singing the national, the Sheik and Volkov. Volkov singing the national anthem. Sheik's waving a flag in my face. All of a sudden, I see size D, the big flashlight batteries flying by me. People in a balcony were throwing size D flashlight batteries. Okay. Yeah. I'm getting hit with plastic canisters of beer in the face, in the chest. And I said, "Sheik, would you get the hell on the other side of the ring with that flag? Get out of my face with that flag, please." So what happened was the ring is starting to fill up with it's up to my ankles in trash. I looked down and I felt something in my boot. I wore wrestling boots, but cut off just enough because I realized you have to slide on a mat. In those days, the mat was a mat. It was canvas. You had canvas on it. And by the last match, it would have ripples in it. So I bought wrestling boots after I had ripped a groin muscle in a Nassau Coliseum wearing sneakers. I bought wrestling boots and I cut them off a little bit. Well, I looked down and there's a dart sticking out of my boot. Somebody in the audience was throwing darts, real darts at the ring. Wow. And I'm saying to myself, this is not good. And I noticed they were closing the beer concessions. Uh-oh. And there were two or three police officers. There was no ring security. 2 or 3 police officers by the ring trying to keep the people away. And Wyndham and Rotundo weren't even in the ring at this time. Oh. So they finally get in the ring, and I go over and I say, "Look, it's supposed to be a 20-minute match, but after 5 minutes, you may be alone. You may have to, there might not be a ref here," because I said, I want to die in the middle of a ring. So they went about 5 or 6 minutes, and they went home. And of course, Wyndham and Rotundo won, and fans went wild, and everybody left happy. But that was probably the most dangerous match I had ever worked with. But funny stories on the Sheik. You want to hear a couple? Yeah. He's wrestling Slaughter after on the independent circuit, I think it was. He's wrestling Slaughter right after the Sheik had left. And in those days, the WWF let people work independent. They would let them work on the independent circuit, pick up some extra money. So I'm doing the Sheik and Slaughter. So the Sheik comes up to me in the locker room and he goes, "Referee Dave, you're my favorite ref, one of my favorite refs. Referee Dave, look, I take off my boot, Slaughter duck. I hit you with he had a little thing on his boot like that. Yeah. I hit you with that. Maybe I slice you 3 or 4 times in the forehead. I go, hello? He goes, I make you look so good. People go crazy. I said, no. She, nothing in my contract says anything about shedding blood or you slicing. I said, no. We want to keep the blood where it is in my head. I don't really would like to see it flow. He goes, but I want to make you look good. I said, I think I look good enough. No, that's not. Oh, okay, but I try. You know, I always like working with you. I said, okay, but I'm not going to let him, slice my head.
With the loaded boot.
Yeah, that was one.
Yeah, Dave,
First
did you ever deal with any situations where, because once in a great while we'll see it on, we still watch some of today's wrestling, and if there's a legit injury, the referee will throw up the X. And did you ever experience? I'm sure you have, where a wrestler got legitimately injured and you had to stop a match or anything to that
Well,
effect.
I was relatively new, and they were. It was a Tonga kid, and Tonga went to the beat of a different drum, you might say. And he got in a ring, and he said, I can't continue. I can't continue. I can't continue. So I asked for help to come out because he was injured. And we got back to the locker room, but he didn't seem like he was too injured. And to this day, I don't know if that was a real injury or something they came up with in the ring, or if he had really injured himself. That was one instance. There weren't many instances where I ever had to stop a match. One time we're on an independent show, and a guy got thrown in head first to the turnbuckle, and he missed it and hit his head in the post, split his head open.
Eek.
So he turns around, and I said, lay down and get covered, and we'll get you out of here. And he goes, but I'm supposed to win. I got relatives in the audience. I said, lay down and get covered, and we'll get you out of here. Your face covered in blood. He goes, I pushed him down. I said, cover him. 1, 2, 3. And then I called for the help to come in, but he wasn't in a situation where I don't think they took as great a risks in those days that they do today, maybe. But I don't recall. I got hurt myself several times. I got hit with a piece of ice on the forehead. Somebody threw from the balcony a chunk of ice and cut my forehead. And I feel this warm stuff coming down my forehead. I've had bruised ribs on a number of occasions. But I don't recall too much a wrestler really being injured where I had to stop the match. I mean, I came close on that one, but he was still kind of. One other time was an independent show, and this one guy was going to slice the other guy with the blade, and the guy got the blade out and he was going to slice himself, and the other wrestler put his foot down, and the blade went in the guy's head a little bit, and the blood started gushing out, and I called for the, I called immediately for help to come in, but other than that, I don't recall. Davey O'Hannon got hurt one night. He really injured his knee very badly. He came off the top rope and he injured his knee terrible, and he couldn't continue. And I did call for that match to be stopped. But most of the time, if somebody got hurt, they would want to finish the match. In those days, they were pretty tough guys. I mean, they never used blades in the old days, if you know, but they used their knuckles. Did you know that?
Oh, wow.
The guy had a lot of scars up here, so they actually use their knuckles too. So these guys are pretty tough. They would hack it out if they did get injured. But fortunately, I got injured really bad one night in a match where it was, who was it? Kamala. Kamala went and splashed this guy, and I went down, and I ripped the groin muscle really bad, and I went down. I said, 1, oh Christ, 2, oh my God, right? But I used stronger language in this, so I used 3 explicit words. And Kamal looks at me and he goes, "Ref, you got some mouth." He goes, "I've been around a lot of refs. That's the strangest count I ever heard in my life." And I go, "Roll me out of the ring." He goes, "What?" I said, "I'm going to get up and raise your hand, but then roll me out of the ring." And he goes, "Okay." And I had really injured my groin muscle bad. So that's when I went and got wrestling boots. But to make matters worse, if I could just continue the story, it was a funny time, but it gets even funnier. it wasn't funny at the time, but I said, "Oh, it's Christmas vacation. I won't be working any shows because you can't turn down a show when the state calls you. You don't want to turn down a show because then they might call you again." So, Dave,
Right.
we need you out in Staten Island to do a show. So I said, "All right." So I got out there. I said, "Thank God there'll be another ref. I'll tell him I can't really work only a couple matches." Well, I was the only ref.
Uh-oh.
And I go, "Oh my God, what am I going to do now?" But I had brought this stuff, atomic bomb, you put on and it eases the muscles. Okay.
Oh.
It's supposed to ease, but it's really, really strong stuff. I mean, it's humongously strong. And I wore contacts because I didn't wear glasses in the ring. So I must have had some on my hands. So I got them on the contacts when I put them in my eyes.
Oh.
And then what happened was, to make matters worse, I had put it down in my groin area and I didn't realize it said, "Do not use in sensitive areas." Well, I got in the ring and I was burning up. My eyes were blurry. I'm
Roger
burning
Clemens.
up. I have to get, so I would run in the locker room between matches and take the saline solution and bottled water and pour it down my pants and drench my eyes in it. Well, every time I did that, the 10 wrestlers in the room were on the floor laughing because they, "What the hell are you doing?" I go, "A lot of heat out there tonight, boys."
Oh man. Yeah.
But that was so I actually found myself getting injured as much as the rest.
Wow. Oh.
John, I know I got a couple of questions for Dave, but John, I know you got one. We talked about MSG 1985, right?
Yeah, the war to settle the score. That was where I really started. I mean, I guess that'd be where I really got into it because it was just an incredible. I was before, but that really just like seemed like it turned everything from the way it was to the way it is now. In a way, what are your thoughts about that? Yeah, the war to settle the score, and were your involvement or anything with that?
No, I was not. Just remind me, who was in the war on the score? I'm 73.
It was Roddy Piper, and it was it Cowboy Bob Orton and Orndorff?
It was well, yeah.
Are you talking about WrestleMania? Are you talking about WrestleMania?
This was leading up to WrestleMania. Yeah.
This was,
Okay, yeah, because
was
they
on
were in
MTV.
WrestleMania, obviously.
This was February 85 in the Garden. The war to settle the score, but the only match they showed on that MTV thing was Piper versus Hogan. But yes, Cowboy Bob Orton was in the corner, and then Orndorff came down.
Mr. T.
Then Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper got involved at the end there to build up WrestleMania.
Early mid-80s, 84, something
This
like that.
was
84, 85.
February 85.
Well, let me ask you this, Dave. Do you, as far as like when that transition happened from like the territory days to kind of like that Vince McMahon era, if you will, to where it did go to WrestleMania and then it became what it became with Hulk Hogan and the pop culture. What was your feelings on that transition at that time with the wrestling business?
Well, when I started in 82, Bob Backlund was champion. Okay. And then I saw Hulk come in and I worked the Nassau Coliseum shortly after Hogan won the belt. Okay. And I went to the locker room after my match to shower, and Hogan and I were the only two in the locker room, and he had the belt on the bench with him. So I went over and I congratulated him on winning the belt from my friend, the Iron Sheik. And we talked for a few minutes. And I looked at that, but I had no idea at that point in time what impact he was going to have. I mean, he was impressive to look at.
Yeah.
Sitting on a bench there. Certainly much different than Bob Backlund, in appearance and in everything. Not that Bob certainly was in great shape. And I loved working with Bob on the independent circuit and during my WWF days, and a wonderful champion. But I'd never realized what impact that was going to have until a little bit later. And then, because he came out of nowhere, if you recall, up until that time, you had to work your way up for a title.
Yeah.
He came out of nowhere and shocked me and surprised me that he won the belt. And I wasn't sure who they were going to put the belt on at that point in time. But then all of a sudden he came up and it certainly worked. And I knew something was changing because
Vince Jr. took over.
Yeah. And the biggest change was this. They went and they got MTV. They appealed. And now, instead of seeing all middle-aged blue-collar worker adults sitting in the arena. You now were being filled with kids who were looking upon these people more as Hollywood stars and superstars as compared to athletes, let's say. Okay, not that they weren't athletic, but they were more considered stars, and people were going to shows not so much to see wrestling, but to see them. And I think that holds true today to a great degree. Being in the same arena with these guys, you know what I'm saying? They look upon them more as superstars, which they are, no question. But that did change. That did change it. A lot of young people came in. There was a mix of rock and wrestling. There was all kinds of stars coming out to shows. It came out of the closet.
Yeah.
It came out. I give you a perfect example. I knew this one kid in the neighborhood, very bright kid, extremely bright. So he shows up at a wrestling show at the county center. I said, I wouldn't expect to see you here. He goes, oh, I have to come. My father makes me come because if anybody sees him here, he wants to see the matches. But if anybody sees him, he says he's here because he had to take me.
Oh,
So you had a lot of white collar closet fans. And now all of a sudden you got a lot of kids, women, a lot more women,
right.
So that was a big difference. And it was a turning point in wrestling. And there was a time when I thought they might burn themselves out, but they never did. And they're still going strong today, obviously.
Yeah, Dave. Quick question for us old school fans. How was it with the 3 ring announcers you had to work with? The famous longtime great Joe McHugh, Howard Finkel, and Michael Capetta.
Well, Joe, I didn't work too much with. He worked mostly out of Jersey. I worked mostly out of New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, the East Coast. But I did get to work with him a few times at the end of his career when he was older. And it was a great thrill to hear him say, and your referees this evening are, who's the famous guy?
Gilberto Roman, Danny Davis, Dick Kroll.
Dick Worley. They said, and your referees this evening are Dick Worley and Dave Dwinell. And that made me feel so great to be able to hear him, because I had listened for so many years to and a timekeeper today and a doctor in attendance and the state commissioners and all.
Love it all.
Yeah.
And he actually went back to the 30s as a boxing announcer. He went back to the early 30s, and he did a lot of famous boxing matches in Jersey and New York, supposedly. I loved Michael Capetta. Was great to work with. Always had the tuxedo on.
Yep.
But my favorite would be Howard Finkel.
The Fink.
Yeah.
I think that goes for all of us. Yeah, this is a tremendous voice.
First time I worked in the Garden, I had the first match, the opening match. I used to get all the opening matches, and I said, gee, they want to start off with a bang. And I found out because the opening matches were the longest and sometimes 20 minutes. None of the other refs wanted to work them. So they always said, put Dave on. So I was out in the ring the first time, and I go out there, and I'm going through, and there's tons of photographers, foreign Americans, and I nodded. The announcers were Superstar Graham and some guy that they got rid of right away, and it wasn't really too good. And I got in a ring, and I'm a Boston fan. I grew up in Massachusetts, so I'm looking. I was not a New York fan, but I'm looking up in the Garden at the banners. And then the lights go out and the ring lights come on, and Howard goes, good evening. And 16,000 people erupted at the same time. I had goosebumps. I had goosebumps. And I loved working with Howard. He was so easy to work with. And he just was a really great guy, a great announcer. And I'm not sure, I'll tell you another story, but I'm not sure if this is true or not, but supposedly it's true. In New York, they used to list the names of the wrestlers and then their real names in parentheses on the cards, on what they'd hang in the locker room on the card for the announcers. So I heard this announcer got in a ring, and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, this corner, weighing 250 pounds from Pawhuska, Oklahoma, is Chief J. Strongbow, also known as Joe Scarpa. He announced 16,000 people.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Totally blew his cover, right?
Yeah, I heard that Vince pulled him right off the show and put on Howard Finkel, who happened to be there,
Wow.
into the ring. But I have no proof that that's a true story. But I've heard this from a few people that this guy actually said that. Now, whether Howard actually went in the ring or not, but he
Wow.
that would have been pretty. And then there was another time at the Garden that they used to have the main event after intermission.
In the middle of the card, yes.
No, they'd have it. No, they'd have it before intermission at the Garden. The main event would be before intermission, and this time they were putting it, and they switched it to after intermission. And before the match took place, the announcer said, "And next month there'll be a return match with Hulk Hogan and defending his belt against," and the match hadn't taken place yet.
Oh,
He was announcing this because they used to try to sell
Oh.
tickets, and
Right.
I heard he was canned too. You know?
Oh man.
Wow. Go ahead,
Well,
Charlie.
I was gonna say now, Dave. Now in recent news, and I don't know how much you keep up with any of the current product of WWE.
I watch.
Now, what are your thoughts of now? Vince retired and now is on the verge, and I believe as of today or yesterday is officially back, but he's going to just be in a chair type of role, and he's not going to get involved in creative. But have you noticed any type of difference? Because I feel like we have as fans, like once it transitioned from Vince McMahon to Triple H running the show,
A lot
the
better.
product seemed to have a little bit of an uptick in viewers, and it engaged viewers a little more with the storylines. They got a little better. Do you feel Vince McMahon coming back might hurt WWE at this point?
First of all, I don't know if he really is going to come back.
Right. Yeah.
Are they sure? Because he could technically be behind the scenes running things and not have to necessarily come back in front of the cameras and still have. I'm sure he's still having an input in this. The man has spent his entire life. But could I give you a story about how he changed over the years?
Absolutely.
I never had much to do with Vince. I worked a lot of the shows for the WWF in high schools, colleges, small arenas, and he never went. He always sent Patterson or Arnie Skolin or Briscoe. So I worked more with them than I did with Vince. But the first time I worked the Garden, he always came to Garden. This is 82. Wore gray sneakers and a gray pinstripe suit. And he was always I have to say, Vince was always very kind to me, always very, how would you say? He would say, "Good evening, sir. How are you?" And I'd say, "Fine, thank you, sir. How are you?" And he'd go, "I'm having a good evening." He goes, "Good luck tonight." I say, "Thank you." And he was always a gentleman to me because at 82, he was a gentleman. He would go into a back room and sit in a chair and look at a monitor and have no say in the show. He would let Patterson and Skolin run the show. He wouldn't get involved at all. He wouldn't talk to the wrestlers. He wouldn't talk to me. He just watched. He had a lot of faith in Patterson. He let Patterson do a lot in those days with the wrestlers as far as finishes, what they were going to do. So in my last show in the Garden in 2000, and I didn't get to work because they stopped the state. They paid us, but they didn't let us work. My last show in the Garden, I was walking down the corridor to my locker room, and this man comes running down the hall, pumped up, and almost knocked me over. It was Vince getting ready to go into the ring to be part of the action. So that's how much I saw a change in Vince from 82. But I did not say anything bad in the book about Vince, and I wouldn't. Because the man let me work the Garden. He could have said, I don't want this guy in there and put me out. He let me work the Garden maybe 13, 14 times. And he was always very polite to me. I don't know if maybe because I was a state official or maybe because he saw that I had a pretty good relationship with the wrestlers because many of them I worked with on the independent circuit. So I can't knock the man. I think what happens is, and this is, again, not a knock on him, I was faced with the same situation. At the end of my career, I put on a little extra weight. I was losing hair on the head. I trouble getting up. I hurt my knee in a match that I could having trouble getting up off my knees. And it was time for me to go. I used to say when I was a young ref, don't these guys know when it's, time to go? And now I was in that situation, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to because it was in my blood. When you've
Right.
appeared before 16, 18,000 people, 20,000 people, you've gone overseas and did a little tour here and there. You don't want to stop. So I imagine Vince is the same way. It's in his blood. It was his grandfather. It was his father. It was him. And now it's his son-in-law. It's a tough thing to walk away from. So I know what he's probably I can sympathize what he's going through. And that's just my thoughts on it. But I would never say anything bad against him because, see, when people knock the Fabulous Moolah, I refereed a number of her matches. She was always very kind and gentle to me. So despite what she may have done or Vince may have done with other people,
Yeah.
I can only go by my own experience. So my own experience was he was always a gentleman to me. So I'm not going to turn around in a book and I'm sure one of the reasons some of the people most of the people have read the book like it, but if you're looking for sensationalism, it's not there. I'm not going to sensationalize. I'm not going to badmouth people. The business was good to me. There's enough of that trash going on. I'm sorry, probably talking too much.
No, not at all. I love to hear it. And let me ask you about this, Dave, with Vince McMahon as well. What did you think of his transition during the Attitude Era to an on-screen character in the villainous role he played? He had one of the best rivalries of all time with Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean,
That was great seeing him get stunned.
I was shocked.
What did you
I was
think of
kind
all
of
that?
shocked. I was kind of shocked because you wouldn't expect the CEO to be of a huge corporation to be. But again, it's in your blood.
Yeah.
Until you've stepped in a ring, and I mean, like at the Garden, for example, live TV all over the country. You screw up, they're not going to edit it out.
Right.
You'll just never work again in the Garden. You know what I'm saying? So there was an edge there that gave you. There was an edge there that really gave you, pumped you up, and or when you sign autographs. I was outside of a small arena in the Queens or Brooklyn, and there was a bunch of kids there. It was in the rain, and they were all asking me for autographs. So I got through about 15 of them. I said, "Why do you want my autograph?" He goes, "Well, you're not important, but you're the only one that's free." but the point is, when you have people asking for your autograph, or you have people cheering and booing for you, like if you don't see something in the ring or whatever, it's like a passion play. It's like you're on Broadway. And it gets in your blood, and it's very tough. I couldn't go to a show or watch it for a while after I retired because it hurt. It hurt.
It hurt not being involved, right?
I wasn't part of it anymore. But again, I started looking, and I said, so many people want to hear about what it was like back in those days. I ought to write a book, even though I'm not famous. I ought to write a book. And Slam up in Canada gave it a real good review. They liked it a lot, and it's written like I'm sitting here talking to you today. That's how the book is written. It's written for fans. It's dedicated to fans. It's written for fans. I made it affordable, $14.99 on Amazon. Kindle is $5.99. I wanted it to be affordable to fans. I wanted them to read it. I wasn't looking. I had a good job. I wasn't looking. I never refereed full time, by the way. I always had a legitimate job. My last job was 23 years running one of the largest tax collection offices in New York State. I collected the taxes of Arnie, Freddie Blassie, and Paul Heyman's parents.
Oh, wow.
They were three of us. But I always had a legitimate job. I did it weekends, summers, did a lot of fairs in the summertime.
So you were the original Erwin R. Shyster before IRS showed up. You were the original one.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
collecting taxes was more. Collecting taxes was more scary and more difficult and more, I guess more scary than actually being in a ring with these guys.
Well, actually, Dave, you beat me to it, but we're going to have you tell and promote the book to all our listeners and fans out there across the country and world so they can get your book from you.
Well, like I just said, I wanted it to be a book for fans. It's dedicated to fans. There's nobody being thrown under the bus. I mean, there's enough of that going on today. We don't need it in a book. I think people want to read stories about what it was like actually back in the day. Were the wrestlers tougher then? I got a little addendum at the end. Were the wrestlers tougher in those days? No, you can't compare. I hate it when people compare yesterday to today. You can't do it. Okay. Wrestlers were tough in the old days. Trust me. But today, the guys are bigger, they're quicker, they're faster, they're certainly entertaining.
Take more risks.
Yeah, they take more risks. I think their careers are probably shorter because of the number of risks they take and the number of injuries they probably receive. But I don't compare the two. I loved working with the old guys, and I loved working with the new guys who were coming into the business. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to work with a few people. Like I never got to work with Steve. I did work with Steve Austin one night when he was with Paul Heyman. We had to do a run-in and split him up in a locker room. He was pretending to be the fake Hogan. He looked like Hogan.
Oh yeah.
And we were in a cold room in some field house. And it took half an hour to shoot this. But like I say, they certainly today they've certainly it's different. It's different. I have trouble sitting through a 3-hour show, watching it on TV for 3 hours. I'll go back and forth to football. I watch AEW. And I'm not going to compare the two. They're a little bit different. Each of the promotions are a little different. They're trying to do their best. They're appealing to people, maybe a little different audience. But again, the book, it's not controversial, but it does bring up, it talks about I think what people need today is a little bit of hope and a little bit of faith. Now, here's a kid growing up in a small mill town, a 2x4 mill town, where everybody works in a mill. Everybody knows everybody. He's 10 years old. He's wrestling on the lawn with his brother. They start a wrestling promotion. I'm the faces in some matches. He's the faces in some matches. We kept records of who won, who lost, and we'd fight because you had to count 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. And sometimes the fights over who pinned the other guy were worse than the matches. And 20 years later, I'm in the ring with guys. I was emulating a Bobo Brazil, and 20 years later, I'm working with Bobo Brazil,
Right.
or Bruno. So, I mean, it's a book about faith. It took me a while to get the license. I kept getting shot down. I was naive. I didn't know it was state license. So I call a WWF and maybe 25 times. And finally a guy answers and he goes, what do you want? I said, my name's David Dwinell. I'd like to be a referee. We don't need any. I said, oh, okay. I said, but can I send you a resume? Don't send me any gifts. They ain't going to do you no good. We don't need you. Bye. So he hung up. I said, well, that went well. So I found out that they had an office in a hotel in New York, and I was working at the Trade Center at the time. So every day at lunchtime, I go to a hotel, try to see somebody from a WWF, because I had been challenged by a friend. I said, we were watching matches on TV, and I said, ref's doing a terrible job. He said, you could do better? I said, yeah. So I'm staying out the hotel every day for a month. Finally, the hotel doorman comes out. He goes, are you a cop, a private eye, a stalker, or just a nut? He goes, get out of here. Well, long story short, you can read about it in the book. I did get the license. And it's a book about, I think, determination. If you really want to do something, you can. And you shouldn't be afraid not to go after a dream you might have. I always loved wrestling. I always dreamt about being involved in the sport. And I knew it wasn't going to be as a wrestler. So it just worked out that I was able to stick around for 32 years. And that's what I share in the book, and all the stories about the most memorable matches, faces I liked working with, heels I liked working with, some of the other referees, things of that nature.
Yeah, and Dave, you bring up such a great point, because us as wrestling fans, just deciding to do this podcast, with today's technology, it gives us the ability to just throw this StreamYard together and get guests. And I know where you're coming from, because for us to be able to speak, like over the past year, we got to talk with Nikita Koloff, jumping Jim Brunzell, B. Brian Blair, and someone like yourself, a longtime referee, where we hear these awesome stories. It's a huge thrill for us. It's not exactly the same level that you're speaking of, but the same principle that, look, go after something, be persistent, and good things will happen. And for us, it's been like such a thrill speak with somebody like yourself, for example, to hear these great stories.
Well, it's great to see younger people like yourself who are involved in a classic era. I had no idea there was so much interest in a classic era.
Oh,
I,
yes.
I retired in 2015. It was only a few years ago that I realized how many. I went on Facebook because my grandkids wanted me to see their pictures on Facebook. So I went on Facebook, and I never realized how many wrestling sites there were that deal with classic wrestling and how many people are really interested. And I've done about 13 podcasts, and I'm amazed, you know, at how many
Yeah.
young people like yourself, and you're helping to keep that classic era alive. And I think you should be commended for that. And I know what you mean about feel like you're being part of the industry.
We
Yeah,
appreciate that. Absolutely,
It's
Dave.
awesome. A dream come true. Like I said, off camera, I've been a fan since 1980, 5 years old, Dave. And this is awesome for me to get a hold of people like you and to have you on our show, and then also to be friends with. It's just great. And
We just thank you for your time, man. Absolutely.
greatly appreciate it.
Well, I realized early in my career, no one ever paid to see a ref. Nobody ever bought a ticket to see me. My job was to make the guys look good, and if I did, I'd hopefully stick around. And I think that's what a good referee is there. He's seen, but he doesn't take away from the boys. Some referees over the years I've seen, they try to take away from the boys a little bit. They think people are there to see them. I never got caught up in that, and that's why I think I stuck around as long as I did.
Well, Dave, we want to thank you again, sir, so much for taking the time today, for spending an hour with us and letting us hear some of these great wrestling stories. If you ever want to come back, the invite is there for you. We'd love to hear more because we know you're probably a vault of wrestling stories that we would love to hear about, and a lot of wrestlers would like to ask you about. But we want to thank you so much, sir, and a happy New Year to you and to your family, and we wish you the best in 23 and going forward.
Thank you, and the same to you and your families. And I'd love to come back at some point at a later date and tell more stories. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir, and you have a great day, great weekend.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Man, like I said, just a thrill for us to be able to talk some old school wrestling with the great guests. What a way to kick off 2023, huh? With a 32-year veteran referee, who has spent a lot of time in the business that is a huge value to us on our show because we talk the classic wrestling and be able to give us those great stories. So certainly appreciate it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
John, let's throw up. We want to say hello and thank all our viewers across all our platforms as we do each and every week here, and our home right here on Facebook, of course. And there's our YouTube channel, which is growing. Thank you. We're up to 29 viewers. YouTube Friends with the Z Media Network. And we have all our shows on there, not just this one, of course. And also we're on Twitter at Count Anywhere, and that is also growing. And we greatly appreciate everybody out there across the country and world.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but we're up to 250 followers on that Twitter page. It's a big deal to us because when it started out, I think it was at like 120, 130, and then we grew about 100 followers over the past year. So I don't know. That means we're doing something right. I don't know, but we appreciate each and every one of you. Even the bots, even the bots that might follow us for like a week and then drop off. Right. We appreciate you too. But guys, again, great show. We just awesome stories. And John, of course, we always have a public service announcement we want to throw up to end our show with, because we are a show of the people, and we want to give some important public health information or whatever the case may be. John, whatever you have there.
Yeah, I don't have a thing for it or even a phone number, but after the events this week that happened in the NFL, wherever you work, wherever you are, especially where you work, let's go with where you work. Make sure that they have a defibrillator there.
Yes.
If you are working at a place and they don't have one, try to ask them to get one and let them know if they can't afford one. There are government grants that will help you get the defibrillator. The defibrillator now, real quickly, I've done a lot of research on it because at a place I was at one time, I was trying to get them to get one. They're expensive, but it's like $1,400, and you can even get one as low as $700. Let's put it that way. You can almost have one in your own house, to be honest with you, if you're doing don't forget, that saves lives. You watched it happen. And if you got a chance and you're at your workplace, ask them if they have one and where is it and how do you get trained to use it.
Very good. I agree.
Great heads up there, John, because as you saw, that was critical for Damar Hamlin on Monday Night Football there. So, yeah, good message there. But, guys, as we wrap up here, I want to wish you guys a great 2023 as well going forward as we continue our show here and some great guests that we will have lined up throughout the year, I'm sure, and some great stories as well that we'll be able to share here on our podcast. And again, we want to thank everybody for checking us out, even if it's just for a few minutes. We appreciate you guys. Have a great weekend. To our listeners, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Yes. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.